there was a lot of things that I have more or less gathered about you ever since really I came across. So it's kind of like a trickle effect where one thing led to another when it came to me being introduced to a person and then their work, and then it kind of spread out from there. So in actually getting to know your husband, where obviously I was more introduced to Frozen, and then once I got to know having heard your conversation that you had with Patrick last year in the promotion for Frozen, and of course listening to your husband talk with Patrick as well too for the film as well, then it kind of just led into one of several other things that I started looking into with your husband's work, and then I'm learning into your work as well too. But there's something that I wanted to actually start up with here with you real quickly because, and I hope this isn't too much of a heavy subject matter to get into here, but I'm really curious about your perspective on something real quickly. That something that Brandon had posted not too long ago in reference to Tom Sizemore. The reason I'm bringing this one up here for you is because there's something specific that Brandon had said in that post that, having heard some of your backstory about more or less the highs and lows you've experienced in the industry, and then your husband as well too. What he had said specifically was when he talked about when Sizemore had passed away, what the experience was like working with him, and the positive interaction he had with working with him on the set. But what he said specifically towards the end that really caught my attention was he had said that what he really appreciated from Tom was that he showed respect to you,
Yeah.
and that when he had said that, the reason that caught my attention was because when I started looking into your filmography in between that period, and listening to you discuss about your career and what some of the things you've experienced, about some, the positive side of it and the negative side of it as well too. But considering that you are now making your directorial debut, which forgive me for forgetting the name, Black Mass is what I think it's called,
Black
right?
Mass.
Is that still what it's called now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So coming off of some projects you have produced and the various projects you have worked on as well too, and then making your directorial debut, the thing that stuck out for me was because when I talked to Brandon, and he talked to me before in the past with several other people too, but when I remember my first conversation with him, one of the things I pointed out before was that, with the amount of work you guys have done together, the thing that stuck out for a lot of people that they had pointed out that because you're his wife, of course he's going to hire you to work on his films. And then the critiques that I happened to come across were not the most pleasant. But what I was curious about with you though is that when I discussed with him about that, he pretty much pointed out that it's one thing to say that it didn't work for me for these reasons, but to have a personal attack on you or him because of the fact you guys are married and working together,
Yes.
that it was like a pass in a lot of ways where people don't think fully understand the actual process in itself. So
Yes.
what I was curious about with you in starting with this here is because of it, when you first got into the industry, it was kind of by chance. If we discussed before about you were going to school, and then when something, I forgot the exact details, but you came across an ad, I think it was, and then it was for an audition. You happened to get the part, and then that pretty much started the whole path here for you. And then meeting Lloyd Kaufman more or less kind of gave you insight about what to look out for in terms of your career and the choices that you're going to make and so on. But along the way, once you and Brendan had started working together and you guys have started a relationship, I'm not sure exactly how much of the attention that you were getting when it came to those reviews and that kind of attention about because you're his wife, that all of a sudden, of course, you're gonna get the job. But along the way, it's clearly obvious that despite those critiques, you're still moving forward with it. But I wonder if somewhere in the interim, if you have ever considered possibly stepping away, and if so, and if maybe not stepping away, but maybe stop working with Brandon for a period of time, just to let things kind of bypass a little bit to be able to refresh yourself and then get back into it again. Because I'm wondering if Brandon had said, "Hey, I got an idea for a film," and you thought, "Let's slow down right now," because the amount of critiques that we're getting for my participation with the film either could be overwhelming, or maybe you probably were at a point where you thought, "I don't care, we're going to do what we're going to do." But I'm wondering if somewhere along the way, if anything had changed for you about your perception of yourself in the industry because of those critiques, and if you learned to prepare for that, or if you had learned to prepare for that during the process, to the point where now that you're more or less kind of taking things on your own, with in this case producing the film with Breakout, and then of course directing your first film with Black Mass, I'm wondering how much of that changed for you about your approach and then your perception of yourself, and how you maybe have recalibrated and decided how you're going to go about it differently this round, despite all those ups and downs that you're experiencing there. I know it's a elongated question. I apologize for it, but I hope you
That's
understand why
okay.
I'm starting up with that here.
First of all, thank you for that question. I get very gentle inquiries into this, but no one just flat out asked before. So since you asked, I'm going to tell you. Firstly, I do what I want.
Right.
That I've always known. I'm from Jersey. I do what I want. Every time someone tells me I can't do something, that's just a challenge. What's up? On the flip side of it, I had a career before meeting Brandon. And I had pretty good traction and trajectory before ever coming into contact with him. In fact, a movie that he was on, the reason we met is because I was hired on his movie to play opposite him. That's actually how we met. And at the time, Brandon was an actor. And I ended up finding out that he knew how to do things behind the camera. And I was already very curious about the inner workings of the filmmaking industry, in addition to performing in front of the camera. So we actually bonded and became close because of my curiosity and his ability. And so we formed a friendship and an ongoing business relationship in the fact that we were making movies together. And a romantic relationship obviously spawned from that.
Right.
But the funny thing about it, and I never really took credit for anything over the years because I was not pursuing the business side of our industry until more recently. I was simply enjoying all aspects of it. Right. So I when I do something, I like to dive in full force. So I've done everyone's job on a film set now. I have gripped, I've PA'd, I've done crafty, I can set up the lights, I know the lenses on the camera, I've DP'd, and the only thing I haven't done really now is direct, and now I can say that I've done that too. So I literally know everyone's job on set. Additionally, I did research behind the scenes, and so I shadowed and eventually was hired as vice president of acquisitions for international sales for a sales company. So I learned distribution. I also worked for a domestic distributor here, learned about sales and marketing and pre-sales and packaging movies. So what most people don't know, and it's amusing to me when I get any kind of pushback or Brandon gets any pushback from putting his wife in the movie again. Yeah. Here's the reality of it. And what people actually don't know is usually the deals are mine. I did the movie and I hired Brandon onto it. Funny how that never ever comes up, and that never even was a thought. It was like, oh, the director's hiring his wife. No, the director's wife hired the director. And so that's how a lot of our initials deals went, and I put them together. And most of the time was convincing Brandon to do them. And that's where the wife or the time girlfriend thing came in, was like, I want to tell this story and I want you to direct it. And so that was kind of push and shove for a little while there. And then ultimately, we kind of found a groove cohesively about the goals I had as a storyteller and the goals that he had as a storyteller. And sometimes they aligned and sometimes they didn't. For instance, I had to convince him. I know you guys talk a lot about Manson on your recent interview.
Yeah.
That was my passion project. It took me several movies working with Brandon before I could convince him that we could tackle it. And he kind of had to be coerced. It wasn't really the kind of story he was interested in telling. It was absolutely my jam, which aligns with Black Mass, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well. But the great thing about Brandon is he is a storyteller first, and he's very passionate. And something that I really identified with immediately was that I think coming from in front of the camera, he really understood actors and he really understood telling stories for performers. And that meant that he understood how to tell the stories of people. His interest really is action movies and his badassery, and he's very, very good there. But something that he really does well is he does tension, he does dread, and he does real people, real characters, real story arcs very, very well. So when you partner those elements in with somebody who knows how to tell a story and humanize people that otherwise wouldn't, you get what I thought was a very exceptional filmmaker. Granted, I had been kind of championing him for years, but like you were mentioning, the whole dynamic of being in a relationship
Right.
really affected that. So when I would say, hey, this guy is a really unique voice in cinema, they'd be like, that's nice, lady. Aren't you guys together? And, so that really worked against us as much as it worked for us. So, I come from my own side of things. I tend to work in the darker side of stuff.
Right.
I have a following there and a support system there. And so having Brandon come into that really helped in that capacity, and vice versa. So Brandon, ironically, had to lend me a lot of filmmaking credibility in the community. And so for a long time, we didn't talk about publicly that we were together because it was a hindrance and not seen as an asset, that the two of us who come from different elements and different perspectives could unite and create. Between the two of us, we really are a full, from beginning, inception, development, financing, pre-pro, all the way to delivery. The two of us can do the entire process just ourselves without even involving anyone else. I always thought that that was going to be an asset. Something is seen as valuable and interesting. It just is a bonus that I also work in front of the camera. On genre pictures, a lot of times the fact that I could very easily attach him or he could very easily attach me worked in our favor for getting the deal done. But as we're moving on, especially in this new space, and I already knew from attacking this prior that when he moved into working in action primarily, that working in conjunction with me would not necessarily be seen as an asset. But at this point, I've already been there. I've already done it. I've already conquered and then some. So I'm not deterred by it. I did have to pitch myself vaguely when we did Breakout, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I put the pitches together for the next action title, and all the other partners on it were men, frankly. But we did an experiment, and they submitted a bunch of titles. All my partners did, and the distributor, Uncorked, hey guys, they chose mine, and that just goes to show. I know my business.
Right.
So I know how to sell a film. And so they chose it. And this is the first movie that I did not appear in front of the camera on, because when Brandon and I discussed that he wanted his trajectory to go more to the action genre, I knew that I would not be seen as an asset, at least not for a while. I'd done a pretty good job, if I pat myself in the back, of establishing myself as an asset, as someone who is independent of Brandon, despite the fact that I choose to support him in his endeavors, whether it's behind the scenes, in front of it, or just championing him in theory. But I can hold my own. A lot of the people that we have partnered with for Actions Late in Thailand and a few other things, they now know that I work independently. I made a distinct effort to take on roles in movies that he was not involved with. So, I've done 6 or 7 movies in the last 2 years that have no involvement with Brandon. I promote the ones that he is involved with, obviously, more, because it's beneficial to me to do so. I champion his career as much as I do my own. And frankly, there's a financial benefit to us being able to double team a project. It's we do this for a living, and so having 2 salaries is always more effective than one. Going forward, to kind of come full circle on your answer, do I choose to do more projects separate from him? Yes and no, is the short answer.
Okay.
So like I said, on Breakout, I just worked behind the scenes, and it's the first movie that we have worked on together that I did not appear in front of the camera from. And I designed it specifically that way, so that way it could be a showpiece more for Brandon, because this is the kind of stuff that he does. And I wanted to be taken more seriously in this new section of our industry as a professional who can hang behind the camera as well. And so I don't feel that I need to prove myself in front of it there. I never have been hurting for roles. I'm very lucky to say that. I've worked consistently since I was 17, so with and without Brandon. So I don't need the roles there, but I do need him to have the perspective from his peers as he's continuing to grow, that he is an asset individual. And not dependent on me. So there will be some that I'm not going to be involved with. And then there are some that I'm absolutely going to make sure to quality control that he has the full ability to do the badass job that he does. And if I can help somewhere in that, I'm always going to do it.
So explain to me then about the business decision making you guys are having here, because you talked before about the financial benefits as far as having two salaries, but at the same time there's something interesting about what you said earlier that I'm actually really curious for you to kind of delve in deeper for me to get a better understanding, because this is actually something kind of new for me when it comes to couples that are working together in the same industry. And I mean, I don't truthfully care about the whole aspect about you don't want to work, you don't want to shit where you eat, that kind of scenario. I understand the reason behind that, but for the both of you though, because you started off in, as you described before, you met each other on set, and then you had something in common, and then that developed into something more eventually.
Yes.
But with that being said, though, in the process of all that, from where you guys have started to how far you've gotten to this point so far, was there at any point concerns about? So you kind of you did discuss about the critiques and what your perception of it is and how you handle that moving forward, and I understand with what you mean by that. But the part that I'm really curious about is, so for example, let's say if you come up with an idea for a story, and people are very interested in the idea. And if you say, I know a good candidate, and you're going to say Brandon as a potential candidate, understanding that he may or may not be interested in it, but if you
Yes.
present it to him and tell him, hey, by the way, I think you're a good candidate for this job because of these reasons, and he may say, let me think about it. But if you go and present it to somebody and tell them, by the way, I have an idea for a story, and the idea I have is X, Y, and Z, and they say, we love it, so we're going to put an investment down for X amount of money. Who do you have in mind for a director? And you say, well, I have my husband, Brandon, who's done the following things. And if they say to you, we like his films, but we don't think he's fit for the job. And quite frankly, if he's going to if you want him for the job, we're not going to invest the money into doing this here. And if Brandon comes in and says, I have a really good idea for the vision that I want to tell for the story, and I've changed my mind, I've looked into it further. And then he shares his vision, and you think it's a good idea, but now I'm in a place where I have to make a decision that I like Brandon's vision, I like what he wants to do, but we need to get this movie made. So the decision making process at that point, where it's now not more about supporting him, but rather we have to make a decision business wise. And if we do this here, you're partnering with me because you're producing it, but I'm not going to have you direct it because of these reasons here. When you come to that point, when it's somewhere in between the time you guys start developing ideas and working on these productions, was that something you guys were prepared to deal with ahead of time, or was that something you have learned along the way, where it just kind of like a crash course that maybe there were some hurdles that you guys were not prepared for, but dealt with it, and now you know how to deal with it moving forward? Because when you are making a business decision, knowing the fact that your husband may want to do something that he's really passionate about, but you are more or less the middleman at this point, where I can make the suggestion, but at the end of the day, without these investors, we can't go on this project. They say no, and having you direct it there. So the difficult process of having to break that to your husband, not saying that it happens all the time, but I'm sure there's going to come to a point where he's really passionate about something that you're working on, that he wants to do. And eventually you're going to have to say, we can't do it, because if we do, we're not going to get the financing. So again, that's a elongated question, but it's a very thorough process that I'm fully aware of how it works. And those are the finer details I don't think people really understand, because you pointed out before about the ideas you're coming up with and how much you're invested here. And I think that a lot of stuff is overlooked because, and I'm kind of going along with it, but I'll get back to the point here. But what I'm really interested about with this whole process here with you is because one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because there's many times I've heard your conversation before in the past. There's something more that I felt like that you were doing, and I had a gut feeling that was the case. There was a lot more that you were doing that I felt like was almost overlooked. And as soon as I saw what Brandon had said in the post, that Tom Sizemore had respected you, and that was very important for him, I was like, that's the real story right there that I want to hear. So again, that's kind of a long gated way to kind of get into it here, but going back to the question, I'm hoping you can kind of elaborate a little further about that decision-making process when it comes to businesses. and removing aside the personal investment that you guys have together on a set project that you may want to work on, but business gets in the way and you have to make a decision what's best for the both of you at that point when it comes to the financial terms of there.
Again, wonderful question. Happy to address it. So for us, believe it or not, that actually has not come up yet, except for maybe with Black Mass, which I'll discuss in a second here. For the most part, when we were making movies together, it started because we were both actors and we were really, I mean, it's horrible to say, but we were really interested in quality control over the products that we were appearing in. And so it came as a necessity.
Okay.
We actually made our first film together just to see if we could. And not only did we, but we did it. We were a very effective team, frankly.
Okay.
So we were like, oh, we might be onto something here. And it just kind of built from there. But it was more of pursuing creative expression and enjoyment than anything else at first. As it picked up, we really found and learned more, and I learned more about the business side of it, and he got more prolific behind the camera. We really understood that this was something that we were going to be pursuing, and so that changed a little bit, but it didn't change how we really approached it. Because we both had been acting for so much. Brandon will never tell you, but he's been in like 100 films, and at this point I almost have 2. And so we really knew our market, frankly. Right. And so we knew what distributors were interested in. So we were doing what I now know is reverse engineering projects before we knew that was a thing. And so we were going towards distributors that would carry our movies and say, hey, what's working well for you right now? We're going to make something. And so that's kind of how that started, of the actual business side of doing it. But we never had had the presentation of, here's a project and Brandon may not be the best person to direct it, because that wasn't how we were approaching our business. We were, I was creating projects for Brandon to direct based on sales trends at the time from distributing partners that we worked with. And we were privately financing them through various forms. So it had never come up that he was not really the best case, or that I was not the best case. Then it kind of grew from there. And then I had distributors asking me to lead certain projects in certain subgenres. They're like, hey, we need you to star in a ghost movie right now. That's what's happening for us. So I would do that, and I would pitch. I would know the subgenre we needed, and I would put together pitches both for Brandon, because I had to convince him to do them, and also to the distributors to see. And then when they would match, that would be the project that we would do. So from there, we've never really had a disagreement on it. There were some projects that I wanted to do way more, and some that he wanted to do way more. So when we would have success in something that was, say, for me more than it was for him, I would then switch gears on the next one and say, okay, hey, what's something we could do to highlight you and your trajectory? And we would just switch off in that way. It only came to a head really with Black Mass, believe it or not. So this is the first time I'm going to talk about it. So I'm going to do it very carefully, because there's a lot of spoilers and I don't want to give it away just yet. But Black Mass is a true crime story, kind of in the vein of Manson. And it is the other story that I desperately wanted to tell besides Manson, and I've wanted to ever since we made that film. I kind of, for things that are passion projects of mine, I kind of keep elements, people, locations, potential business partners just in the back of my mind for years and years and years until the timing is right on it. So when we did Frost over COVID, that was the first time we had a relationship with our distributor and financer, which is Cleopatra. And Frost was kind of an audition to see how we all worked well together or not. And we enjoyed the process. So after Frost's success, they offered us another one. And I kind of turned to Brandon and I was like, how about it? And this is the first time he just flat out told me no. And so I kind of coaxed him for a little bit, but the reality of it was it was not the right project for him to take on at this time, because we had worked so hard on his trajectory to get him where he currently is, which is doing these mid-level action movies. And so I didn't think it was worth it to have him come on and tell my passion project, because it could be a distraction from the trajectory that we have him on. And so the last time I went to AFM earlier this year, I went to sell several friends' movies. And so I took a lot of meetings. And speaking of distraction, half the time the meeting would be like, oh, wait, you work with Brandon. Or, oh, wait, you're Devanny. And I know you have all these things going on. And so I was not as effective at selling as I normally was, because we had kind of created this little buzz around the two of us making movies together. And so they were very interested in our projects instead of the projects I was, being hired to sales rep. So kind of the opposite of what you were asking was, well, what if you put together a project and it's not the right thing? The reality of it is we've been so effective in what we were trying to do for Brandon's career specifically, that it's now seen as an asset. He's now bankable to a lot of distributors, a lot of financiers. So presenting him as part of a deal is now absolutely an asset that I bring to the table, as opposed to the other way around. So I don't have to sell him as much as I do just solidifying the right cast and the right project. But Brandon, and most of the time myself now, are asset puzzle pieces that doesn't really mean. But on Black Mass, it didn't make sense. And so I had a pre-sold movie, and I don't like to leave money on the table.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I have this project, I have the distributor, I have the financier, I have, it's my story I really wanted to tell. I can't believe they're going to let me do it. I don't have a director that I feel comfortable could pull this off within the means that we have to do it with, and achieve what I want to with it. Manson, I think it's not really a shock probably that it was a very low budget movie.
Right.
And yet we were able to do a lot with it, and a lot with the storytelling. And that's something that Brandon really excelled at. So I was kind of freaking out thinking, who else that I would work well with could really achieve that. And I couldn't do it. I tried to get him to come back, and I tried to pull the wife card, and I was like, come on, babe, make this movie for me. And he, but we really did agree that it just wasn't the right time for him to be doing this. And so I went back to the distributor. I made a pitch for myself. I was like, hey, not a director, it'll be a first time. But whereas I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable on other stories, I was like, I have been thinking about this particular film for going on a decade now, and I really know what I want for it. And what do you think? I didn't even get through the first conversation of my pitch before they let me do it. They were like, I just want to give a quick shout out to Cleopatra for being so incredibly supportive of me. And, it's a lot of guys over there too. And they got, it was like a no-brainer for them. They're like, absolutely. And they did the deal immediately with me. So just wanted to say thank you to them for that. And so Brandon still supported me on it. I was able to convince him to pen a script from my story, which was really great, in partnership with another of our friends. And so I'm still having his involvement and his support and backing behind the camera a little bit in that way. But overall, I think, I think having your partner work with you for some reason in our corner of the business is seen as a negative, and I never understood why. Kevin Smith made a whole big campaign about, I work with my friends. I'm a kid from Jersey. I make movies with my friend. And he went all the way up to, Oscar level and still did that. And, I think I'm not a huge feminist. I'm like, my friends, my colleagues are guys, like I can hang. But I think that there really is a double standard for women who are working with significant others or partners versus guys. Guys kind of get shit for saying, oh, I put my girlfriend in the movie. But, if someone brings their significant other and they've never worked in the business before and they only ever work on those films with their partner, I could see what maybe someone would raise an eyebrow or not, because it's someone's project and that's who's super important in their life. Why wouldn't they share that with them? That I think that's awesome, but it's not viewed that way. And on the flip side, if you're a girl who works with your partner, you're absolutely automatically categorized as somebody who is dependent on them instead of the other way around. It's never perceived that you might be the person who is supporting that effort. But if you look throughout film history, a lot of the most prolific directors, producers had a partner, had their significant other in there quietly supporting them. It's always been the case. It just hasn't been brought to the forefront until very recently. And I am proud that we work together as effectively as we do. And I think that we are stronger together as storytellers. And I think personally and professionally, if I can ever assist not only, my husband, but my friends, my colleagues, my co-stars, I've always been really generous about wanting to succeed as a team. And that's how I view it, as a teammate, not necessarily as a significant other. We're all on the same team.
I'm going to shift gears real quick about something, because there's something that you have shared before briefly in the past, and I think you even have in your social media too, if I recall correctly, because I remember reading the whatever the caption was there. But so I'm going to bring this up with you about something you shared in the past, but I'm going to bring in a conversation to how somebody you worked with before, I believe, Bill Oberst. You worked with in the past. So I've had him on the show before, and I discussed with him about various things about his experience in the industry. One of the things that I brought up with him about was the fact that he's made it very well known that he's a Christian. He is, he's very involved with his faith. But for him, though, what I was curious about, and I'm going to lead this into with you, is because the roles he mostly gets are mostly just horror films and things of that nature, right? And I asked him before if he's ever met resistance from anybody in the community, the Christian community, as to why are you doing these said films, because they're horrible. The character you play, especially one character, I think was Circus of Dread. I can't remember the exact title, but it's one of the films I remember thinking like, this is a horrible. Yeah. That's the one. Oh, yes, thank you. And I remember telling him that character you play is utterly despicable. You were great in it. I think it was a great movie, but it was just, it's such a downer of a film because it seems like there's no end to this evil. He's like, that's the point. I was like, I understand that. But the point I'm pointing out is that because you play these type of roles or you're in those type of films, that I would imagine you're meeting some sort of resistance from people that say, why are you doing that? And then what he ended up telling me is that I just don't respond to them. I don't have to answer to them. Before in the past, he said he would, like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm doing this. He gave an explanation and now he's completely stopped doing that. But I'm curious with you, though, in that same angle, too, because when I had learned about I think I saw in your social media post about your faith, and then you talked about it briefly about your childhood growing up, that you never really saw a horror movie, I think until you were 17, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, and then obviously your career kind of just took off from there, and you have been known within that industry for your work in horror film. Mm-hmm. At the same time, though, I'm wondering if anything has changed for yourself, because I know you're still very much practicing the faith and you're still involved with it, but I'm not sure if at any point something had changed for you about how you may look at yourself because of the said roles you're partaking in or the films you're working in and whatnot, that maybe you either questioned yourself, your motivation behind it, and does it sit well with you? And secondly, if there was any doubt about any sort of what's the best way to describe it? If there's any sort of conflict that you had about the decision process you're making about working on a film that maybe would be very much against your personal set of values with your faith, but you're working on a project that maybe you really wanted to, or maybe you took it on just simply for business purposes, like, I need a paycheck and this pays me well, and I don't mind the subject matter so much, so I can work with that and just kind of get on with the day. So it's a multiple question, but I'm wondering if you had any sort of resistance from that and how you handled it before, how you handle it now, or was there ever a concern about having to deal with it, or were you just comfortable with how the path you were taking, that knowing you trust yourself, you trust relationship in the faith, and therefore you have no concerns about the outcome of what you're going to get out of the various things you're working on that would make you feel uncomfortable with how the choices you make and your background because of your faith as well too. I hope that I didn't convolute the question too much at the end.
It's a great question. I'm very outspoken about my faith. Bill is too, so just a shout out to him. We actually kind of bonded over that very early in our careers. We were, of all things, in a movie together early in both of our careers called Nude Nuns with Big Guns.
I saw that movie. Yeah.
Thank you. So it's it obviously came up really early on for us, and for me, I did have to think about it. I was like, is this okay? I did. I worked on it in church, personally, professionally. There was some questions early on in my career. It's like when I knew that I loved it and I wanted to pursue it, I was like, can these two things coexist? Truly, am I going to be true to my creative art, true to the artist, and true to my faith and to God?
Right.
And I struggled with it briefly, trying to figure out, but something that I really just full circle on, I was like, I'm going to pray about it. And I did. I prayed a lot about it. And it's something I encourage anyone who is, unsure of any decision in their life, just give it over to him and listen with your whole heart for an answer and accept the answer when you're given it. So for me, I started asking at church first. I asked everywhere except God. Is this okay? What do you think? I asked pastors. I asked parishioners. I asked people on the internet. I asked everybody what they thought. And then I realized that I'm asking all the wrong places. And the funny thing about it was everyone had a different answer. Right. There was no one set answer of like, this is right, this is wrong, and when I looked at it, I looked at the bigger picture. That's kind of religion in a nutshell. Everyone's got their version of what's right. For them, for their church, for their community. Everyone's got their interpretation. And that's something that I really love. I think a lot of, communities will tell you my way is the only way and the right way. When in reality is we're all very different people. We're all built very differently. And that's why there's so many different ways to reach us, to inspire us, to love us, to care for us. We all have individual needs. And I think faith fits in that perfectly. We all have individual needs when it comes to faith. And so there is an outlet for you to reach God. However you need to do that, whatever religion that is, whatever denomination that is, whatever approach and style for you, there is a pathway to that relationship. And so you just have to find the one that works for you. So I really, really, really prayed about it. And everything that I do in my career, believe it or not, I have asked God. And God has specifically led me down to certain opportunities, to certain people, to certain trajectories, and even certain projects. And I have a very, very, very active relationship, and they do coexist really nicely. And the reason why faith and horror can coexist is because I believe that God uses us and our talents, our individual talents, whatever that may be. I know that if I were to get up on stage for my church, I'd be so awkward. I would not know the right things to say. I'd be really weird trying to lead a prayer. It's not what I do, right? Even though I do believe it, that's not what I'm called to do. My calling is really to do what I'm doing right now, which is have conversations. It's a very normal, real person. I don't know if I'm normal, but normal-esque person. And, and show that you can be you can live your life and have God be part of it. They're not like one or the other. Having that relationship doesn't look one way, even though, certain people on a platform or a stage will tell you this is what a Christian looks like, but that's not the case. There's one of the band members from Korn, Brian Welch, is like amazing inspiration, has done amazing work in the Christian faith as himself. And he actually talks about this a lot and talks about how he struggled and was like, how can I be a member of Korn and a Christian? And God answers him over a long, amazing, incredible journey. He has a book and a documentary, which I highly suggest
I have that book. I bought it when it came out, and I actually met him too. He did a signing when I used to live up in Northern Virginia. So he was. That one caught me by surprise. I remember at the time when it occurred, but I didn't mean to cut you off there. But yeah,
no, it's amazing, right? So I love that he got a calling because he's exactly who needed to kind of lead that narrative, and it's something that I had really known for myself. And the funny thing is there's a ton of Christians in horror. There's a ton of practicing Jews in heart. There's a lot of people who are very religious who are in our genre, and they don't know that they can talk about it. They don't know that they can be proud of it. Everybody has darkness and lightness in their life, in their soul. And so if you find a healthy outlet for the dark, and I'll be the person to say, I'm a super weirdo. I like the darkest of shit out there. I like, it's hard to offend me. But I use that creative outlet of movies, of horror genre, to put that somewhere. So that way, when I'm done purging all that, what I have left as a human being is a lot more light to give and to live in. And so it's people who I think feel that they have to have this perfect shell to be perfect, which none of us are. Those are the ones that are happy, that are harboring the darkness because they think that they can't let it out. And that's when, you have a lot of misery, you have a lot of depression, you have a lot of, horrible acts that just explode because they don't have a healthy place to put that. And that's what horror does. It gives you that cathartic, healthy place to put some of that stuff. And I love it. I absolutely think that, like I said, God uses us all in different ways in the way that we are. And so we're not supposed to look like that perfect Christian. That perfect Christian serves a purpose in that community, in that place, doing exactly what they're supposed to. But we're all made differently and excel different things and embrace different things for a reason. And who's going to go talk about God in a horror podcast? Because if you have the perfect Christian from Bible camp show up and start talking about, you're going to tell them kick rocks, weirdo. You're not going to, that's not who you want to hear from. You know what I mean? That's not how you're going to communicate. You're going to receive information.
Right.
But if Brian Welch shows up and says, yo, this stuff changed my life. This stuff is a really good thing for me. And I'm a better musician for it. I'm a better father for it. I'm a better human being for it. And I'm still me. That might be something that you might hear, that someone else might hear. And so we all need to play a part in who we really are and be the best versions of ourselves that we can. And
so
for me, that's what religion does.
So essentially, in this case, because I understand what you mean by that, but when you're describing about Brian, it was regarded as, so in other words, his association, his involvement with the metal community, that's a gateway for him. And then in your case here, you're talking about your involvement with the horror genre. That's your gateway to more or less open, the doors for someone else to say, oh, I love horror film, but the fact that I understand what you mean by that. Well, so what I wanted to kind of get you to clarify a bit further on this end here with regards to what I was asking with Bill was the resistance you made, being from the Christian community or anyone outside of it. In this case, let's say like an atheist or agnostic, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if, what sort of hurdles you have to deal with in terms of both sides, in this case of the community, religious and non-religious, that people may come up and say to you, well, if you're a Christian, then why are you doing a horror movie, being from the opposite spectrum? Or if they're saying to you, well, you are a Christian, why are you doing these type of films? Doesn't look good on you, doesn't look good on us, or whatever the case may be. How did you learn to deal with that at first? And then how have you done to deal with this now moving forward here?
At first, I heard them. I guess kind of what Bill said, and I thought about it and I apologized, and I really did some soul searching on it, and then I realized that everyone on the internet has an opinion, and everybody at church has an opinion. And here's the thing: none of them are done and ready to be perfect. Everyone has their own things they're working on. Everyone needs to focus on themselves, and frankly, it's what I do. Horror is what I do. I'm never going to apologize for it again. I love it. I'm proud of it. I embrace it. And for me, I like I said, I seek out kind of the worst of it. And the reason that it's okay is because I, as Devanny Pinn, am not going out there and, eating babies. I'm not stabbing people to death. I'm not chainsawing somebody through the face personally, despite the fact that I might want to. So, there's that hard line of reality versus, playing pretend, which is what I do for a living. And as a storyteller, it's my job to tell that story, that person's truth. And so I do it full on. with no hesitation. And I don't think about like, oh, would my church like it if I hacked this guy's face off right now? No, I don't think about that. I think about I think about, this character is doing this right now, and here's why. And
Right.
I am just a puppet that embodies it, and I'm going to portray that. So, like I said, when I'm done playing a character or I'm done telling a story, then what's left is actual me. The same way, like if you work at an office,
Mhm.
say you work at the post office, are you somebody who, truly is passionate about filing something? Is that who you are? No, that's just the job you're doing right now. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So, you know, you have to know to not take your work home with you. But all of us, dress a certain part for a job, put on a presentation, use different lingo, different,
Right.
We all present ourselves in our work self versus who we are when we're on the couch at home with our significant other. You know what I mean?
Right.
You got to see that yesterday. Sorry about that. So there's different levels, and my job is the same. It's a little bit more in your face, um, but it really, it's the same rules apply. It's a job. It's what I
Right.
do for a living.
So here's the question that I was curious about the decision making process when it comes to the roles that you're being offered. Um, you said before that you pray about this and you come to a decision making process about based on whatever the answers may be for yourself and what to do. I'm actually curious about with that part of the process for you because I'm not sure if you've ever been given a role. Like, so I'm gonna use new nuns with big guns as an example. Not to say that that's I want to focus on that, but I'm using it as an example
Yeah.
about that decision making process for yourself, where they'd offer you the part and they explain what the plot details were, and then they are waiting on your response. And if you're saying to them, give me a minute, let me think about it, and I'm not asking you to give me the details about what that's like for you, but I'm curious about if you're looking at the script and you're knowing what the story's about, and just the title alone can probably rub people the wrong way, especially within the community who are more conservative, I would say. And if you come to a decision and say, "Yes, I'm going to take this part because I prayed about it, and therefore God said, it's okay, do it."
Yeah.
I'm actually really curious about that process for yourself because if you're looking at something that you're depending on an answer to say to move forward with it, or let's say, for example, if you get in your case here, you say you get an answer, but you
Yeah.
still don't want to do it, and you're getting a response in your situation where, in this case, you say God says yes. If he says yes, and you say I still don't want to do it, and then you come to a point where now you're deciding for yourself at that moment, should I do this or should I not? Because it's okay, but I don't want to do it because I'm uncomfortable with X, Y, and Z, or maybe I just don't want to do it, period. So I'm curious about what that thought process for yourself and under those circumstances for you, because I understand it, but I don't think I fully understand that whole process on how you go about it, especially when you come to a point where you've got an answer on how to go about it, and now the choice is yours to make the decision for yourself.
Great questions. You're
Right.
full of these, but this is fun.
Okay.
Okay. So, New Duns is a great example of to dissect on this because it really shows the whole process for
Right.
for me personally. So I had seen the casting call for Nude Nuns with Big Guns, and I could not get it out of my head. I was like, oh, this is gonna be huge. I was like, I feel like I should do it, and I was praying about it, and God was like, yeah, go for this. And I was like, this is stupid. So I submitted casually. I didn't actually get it, and I kept getting messages. And I don't know how to explain that. I mean, if you're somebody who has a relationship with God, it's a very personal way that you receive answers to things. For me, I get overwhelming sensations about something. So
Okay.
I could not shake this Nude Nuns with Big Guns project. And I was like, I didn't get it. I was like, what am I supposed to do? So I went and I shot Piranha 3D. And I had a really good experience there, but I was struggling with my faith. It was early in my career. I was playing the wet t-shirt girl in the middle of that, Eli Roth was squirting my tits with his hose. I mean, it was like bad, right? And so I'm like, that was one of the parts where I'm like, am I going to be able to do this and be a Christian at the same time? And so of all things, we were in a scene of 1,000 people, and I got picked by the director to, basically star in the scene. And the girl who got picked with me, we ended up becoming really close friends. And lo and behold, we decided to go back. We were shooting in Arizona. We decided to go back to LA together. And she was like, hey, just hop on with me. I've got to go do this next movie that I booked. And I was like, oh, great, cool, right? It's Nude Nuns with Big Guns. And when I get there, she sends the director my info. Was like, hey, I just shot this movie with this girl. You should hire her. And they were like, yeah, absolutely. Bring her right now. So even though I didn't get the role, they brought me onto the set and wrote something for me. And ended up featuring me in a bunch of different scenes. Right. From there, one of the scenes I was in was with a girl named Tawny Amber Young. Hi, Tawny. Who had just finished shooting Rock of Love. And I had been up for Rock of Love. And I turned it down because I wasn't sure if I wanted to embrace the entertainment industry or not. I went to flight attendant school instead. And literally a few months into that, like, I all but got fired. The airline imploded. I mean, like, literally not happening. And instead, I went to go do some of this stuff, and I just had one boom, boom, boom after another. I was like, okay, obviously I'm supposed to be doing this instead. So I met Tawny in there who had just shot Rock of Love. So I have this, literally in a sea of 1,000 people, I found the girl who was going to the set of Nude Nuns, and I found the girl who was part of the production that I should have done rather than trying to pursue a normal life. And top it off, it was starring Bill Oberst, who was the other very outspoken Christian in heart at the time. And so it all kind of came full circle to me. Not only that, when I did it, they blew me up, and God kept telling me, like, embrace this, embrace this, embrace this. And then it went to Netflix and was #1 on Netflix for months and months and months. Made me a huge star at the time. Right. Skyrocketed my career. I literally haven't stopped working since. So that's a classic example of how things have gone for me. When I try to do it my way, to answer your question, it's always extremely short-lived. It never, ever works out. And it's always, my way is always the safest, more logical, more obvious choice. And the far-fetched, crazy, like, no way, 1 in a million kind of opportunities are always God's way. And those are the ones that work out every single time. So early on in my career, I learned that, it sounds super cliche, but, like, I'm not in control. I am on this path and along for the ride. I could try to do it my way, but good luck with that. Doesn't quite happen. So we're doing it God's way, and I could be a willing participant, or, and this is not for everybody. Some people have, much more subtle relationships and encounters. I am a very, as you can tell, extreme person. I do everything big, and so my directions, my messages, they're not subtle little whispers in the wind. They're big, fat billboard signs, and, like, literally all roads close off except the one that I'm supposed to go to, and I get shoved down that way. So I just decided to go with it. And sometimes I'm sitting here and thinking, like, this is crazy. People are gonna think I'm nuts. What am I doing? I'm wasting my time. And it doesn't always make sense. And if I just ride with it, it always makes sense. I have dodged some really, really horrible things from just trusting. I've been given some amazing opportunities from trusting. I've found the right people in my life and in my business from just listening and paying attention in that way. And so it's been a steady, slow. I mean, I've seen some people who did some really horrible things that went straight to the top, but they didn't stay there. My path has been slow and steady up, and I have faith that is going to continue doing that.
I'm curious about something you just said before, which you talked about, you having a big personality. But the thing is that I was curious about, where you had talked about how you discussed about how you're receiving the messages, if you will, to understand the overall path, if you will.
Yeah.
But what I'm actually really curious about with how you said that is because I'm trying to understand the actual process for yourself to comprehend and absorb the information, if you will. What I'm curious about with you though, when it comes to processing certain things, what was actually the hardest thing for you to being in this industry, right? Having to learn to understand certain things along the way when it came to the negotiation process, then the networking. It sounds very basic, on paper, just talk to
Yeah.
people. And I understand that is the case. I understand the business making process, the business decision making process can be a little bit more complicated, but on surface level, it's kind of straight to the point.
Yeah.
But when it comes to how you are describing yourself, that God gives me a full-on billboard that says do this, and then you
Yep.
make a decision. Sometimes that's not always the case in
Yes.
in a more direct path with certain people or certain scenarios, whatever the case may be. So I'm wondering, if when you first started doing that for yourself, was that a very difficult thing for you to kind of pick apart and figure out, what works for you, what doesn't work for you? Or is it a situation where, again, is it something that you talk about before, that I pray about it and then God says, here's the answer? Because I'm wondering for yourself too, because it sounds like to me from what you're just describing that you pray about it, you get an answer. I I'm not saying I don't believe you, but what I'm trying to understand is that if you don't get the answer, what do you do then? And
Great.
how do you come to terms that, okay, so do I have to figure it out for myself? Is this God telling me you're on your own? What does that mean too? If he's not giving me an answer, so I'm understand. I want to understand
That's a
that
great, no,
process.
it's a great question. Very, very valid. It's so, um, when I say that I always get the answer, I do. I should have been more specific. It doesn't come immediately every
Right.
time. It doesn't. Sometimes I have to guess. Sometimes I don't hear anything. I don't get any kind of message, any kind of help, for long periods of time. And when you're used to getting help so blatantly, to have it, to have them kind of ghost, it's a
Mhm.
little, it's a little like, oh crap, what do I do now? Um, I definitely have those moments, but I have them less now than I used to. Because what
Okay.
I found is those moments of silence, those even longer periods where I'm not sure which way to go or what I'm supposed to do with it, um, there's always a bigger picture that gets revealed. Here's why, here's how, here's what you were learning to get to that bigger answer. A classic example of it is actually, so those who are watching, I missed our call earlier because I was working on Black Mass's marketing campaign. We are taking it to Con Film Market, yay!
Oh, congrats!
So
Yeah,
I'm
I
like
forgot
not,
you mentioned that
yeah,
earlier. Yeah.
I'm not sleeping. I'm like full time on that. So I was talking to my co-producer, who is not religious. I work with a lot of people who are not.
Right.
She's not religious, but she was telling me, she was like, I went to Con last year and I had no idea why. She's like, I worked my ass off. I met tons of people. She was like, I was working for other people. I was doing slave labor. It was like
Mhm.
the whole time questioning, why did I do this? It didn't make any sense to me. And she's like, for this whole last year, I was wondering, like, why did I spend all this money? Why did I, get all these relationships for other people? Why did I do this? And she said, I had no idea that this opportunity was coming when she met Black Mass. I had no idea how much it was going to do for me. I didn't realize that all of the work I was doing now was going to pay off times 10 for this project that I'm basically going to be known for now. And she said, she's like, I'm not religious, but there's just a full circle, big picture here that I was doing all this work, not sure why. And now I have the answer. It was because I needed that information in order for us to be successful here with this project in the moment that it really was going to matter. It was
Mhm.
me being on a trajectory, not even knowing why or how, and yet I'm exactly the right place, exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that was super impactful for me because that's how I feel about a lot of the times when I'm not being given a clear answer to things. It's because I'm on the right track in one way or another. We're all on the right track. So
Right.
there's free will, there's free choices, and there's free opportunities, and there's learning, and there's growing. and there's downtime in between huge life decisions. But when it's something really massive, um, I always have guidance. And if I make the wrong choice, all doors close. There's literally no choice but to go down the right one if I make the wrong one. And that's from having faith, and trusting that the greater plan for me is a good one.
I'm really curious about something with you. And I want you to, I will understand if you don't want to answer, but it's not going to be a dark question by any means. But I'm just really curious about something with you.
Dark questions, it's fine.
Well, what I was curious about with you, what was that?
No, I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I was like, I like darkness. It's fine. You can ask me dark questions.
No worries, no worries. Okay, well, I was curious about something with you on this here. Because we talked about it before, or I asked you before, I meant to say, of this decision making process of choices you're making on a film, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if there is a limitation as far as how far you. I'm not saying that you're going to do something bad to get ahead, and that's not what I'm referring to. But I'm talking about how far are you willing to go for, let's say, a said role or a project that may more or less be out of your comfort zone. And I'm wondering if there is a sand in the line for you where you are telling yourself, this is the line I'm not going to cross no matter what, be it for religious reasons or, business reasons, whatever the case may be. Because, when we talked about briefly about new duns with big guns, just off that title alone. And if I'm telling somebody, say, well, I know someone who's religious who worked on that movie, and they say, what, that's considered kind of taboo. That's red.
I know two.
Right.
Two people who worked on religious.
Well, what I'm pointing though is that, like, something like that it's easy to understand, the reasons why someone may say, why would you do that? But we've talked about before.
Yeah.
But there's something else I'm curious about, where that line is for you, where you are telling yourself, I will not cross this line at all. Not because, I'm not saying, again, we've talked before about, some people who have done some stuff just to kind of get ahead, and then all of a sudden they make it to the top and they don't last so long. I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to about an actual decision on camera or a project.
Or personal.
Right. That will be the line that you will not cross. That's going to be, no matter what. And I'm curious what that limitation is for you, because I have a feeling that you're pretty good about making some wiggle room, but I still believe that there's a point where you're just not going to go beyond that line if it comes to the point where someone gives you an option, do this, or if you don't, it is what it is.
Well, I can tell you professionally, on camera, there is literally nothing I won't do.
Okay.
If it makes sense for a role, I mean, makes sense. Not
right.
like, someone just wrote it in real quick. Yeah, let's try that out. No, but if it makes sense for a character, there's nothing I won't do on camera.
Okay.
That being said, personally, in my professional life, there were a lot of times over the years where I was presented with scenarios that would have absolutely, hypothetically, advanced my career. Things where I would have gone straight to the top, things where I would have made a ton of money. There was a lot of opportunities for advancement if I was willing to do some stuff that was not so PC.
Right.
And I'm not going to get into any of the details of what that was, because a lot of people in our industry take advantage of it. So I am not judgmental in that way. Everyone's path is their own. Everyone's trajectory is their own. Learning experiences, advancements are individual. For me personally, as a Christian, I wasn't comfortable taking advantage of any of them. And there were times throughout the years where I was like, should I have just done that? Should I have just, helped myself out? I like the
response you just gave me. I think that's an honest response you just gave me there. But yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I was just want to highlight that what you just pointed out there.
It's there is definitely a straight to the top cheat sheet in our business and in a couple different areas, but I had to make a decision of who I wanted to be when I went home at the end of the day. And that ultimately for me was more important. When I looked in the mirror, did I feel good about it? Did I feel like I was being true to myself, being true to my faith? even if all my wildest dreams allegedly came true, knowing what I had to do to get there, would I be okay with that? And the answer was no. And so I passed up a lot of opportunities because of that. And I kept wondering, like, should I? Should I? But you know what? Every single time, um, I mean, I've seen executives get taken down. I've seen entire
Mm.
companies fold. I've seen money dry up. I've seen relationships dry up. I've seen a lot of different stuff, and pretty much every opportunity at the beginning of my career that would have been a cheat sheet, almost all of them have absolved one way or another. I am one of their surviving elements from that era, and I pride myself on that. And even more so, a couple of the people who were offering things like that at the beginning have since turned around and asked me for a job. And so,
Interesting.
yeah, it's very, very rewarding. And so that's the thing is I tell everybody, and I get this question a lot, like breaking into the industry, what advice do you have? I think
Yeah.
the bottom line is you do what's right for you,
Right.
and don't ever do something that you're not 100% comfortable with in any capacity, in any aspect of our business and in your life. Be very, very comfortable in all the choices that you make. And then, you won't have to worry whether it turned out good or bad. You can feel confident in the choices you made and why.
I'm curious about something here with you about your faith because it's clearly obvious that your faith is a major contributing factor for your overall look in life, decision making process, among other things as well too.
Yeah.
Um, not this, I don't think it's a fair question to ask, but I'm just curious about: do you think that if it wasn't for your religious background, your upbringing, um, I know it's not an easy question to answer, and I don't think it's a really fair one to ask. But I'm just curious about knowing what you know now. If you hadn't been in that environment for yourself, where you were taught those values and taught, you were shown, these various paths that you could have taken here, and you made a decision that was best for you, and asking for help in this case with God and whoever else you may talk to about some sort of decision making process about what's going to be the best option for you as a person in your career and so on. But if you hadn't had that instilled into you as far as your religious values are concerned, do you think that maybe the decision making process you've made now would have been just the same, knowing the type of person you are, the way that you approach things, the way that you present yourself, and so on and so forth, removing your religious background, being the person you are today? Do you think that would have been the same outcome for you if it hadn't been for that?
Great question. I can say for me personally, no way in hell. Like
Okay.
I'm a go-getter. I'm a thrill seeker. I like risk. I like mischief. Like I absolutely, I still struggle with myself. Like there is temptation everywhere. There is, um, I need, me personally, I needed those boundaries firmly in place to keep it together.
Okay.
Because I am a hot mess personally.
I
Like
see
if
what you're
I did
saying.
not
Okay.
have that,
I
it
got
would
you.
have been way more chaos than it currently is. And to answer your question more thoroughly, I was raised with a more strict background, but I wasn't
Right.
raised in a religious one. Religion came from, like, my family is still like my mom is hypothetical Christian, but she's not active in the faith. And my little brothers, I have three of them, are probably as farthest away from Christian as it gets, and they're proud of that. We kind of tease each other, like, so it's not that I was brought up in faith. I
Okay.
actually sought it out in middle school. And
Mm.
frankly, it was because, like, I was a huge nerd. I didn't have any friends. And so, like, my mom suggested, hey, there's a youth group here for middle schoolers. You want to go and meet some people from other parts of the towns? And I was like, no. And I went, but I really liked it. And it was there in this really play group for middle schoolers that kind of did introductory touching on faith a little bit. that I kind of really, again, it's so cliche, but like got saved. I literally had God reach out to me there and kind of guide me through. And it was exactly, of course, the right time, exactly what I needed. And I have found lifelong friends in there. And I found structure in my life, and I really needed it. I mean, what middle schooler doesn't need structure, right? But my personal life at that point, my family life was really chaotic. And so it was not like love at first sight or anything, but it was a safe and stable foundation that I was really craving. And from there, I learned more about my faith, my religion, and really embraced the relationship on my own. And that has carried through to the rest of my life and how I live it.
It's interesting. So I want to shift gears on one other area here because there's something that I remember it caught my attention. And if it wasn't for the fact that this had slipped out, I don't know if I would have ever asked you about this here, but I know you're originally from New Jersey. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's interesting for me though, because this is kind of a multi-layered question, but you can answer however you want. But I was curious about something that I came across. Actually, this is an interview that you did in the promotion for Frost, and your Jersey accent slipped out in that conversation. It didn't slip out here, but it did slip out there. But what I found very interesting for you was the fact that it came out and it was actually strong at that moment, and then you reverted right back to the way you talk now.
You just out me right now. Oh my God.
So I was just curious about so it's interesting for me because when I heard that, I wanted to ask you about that, but it was something else that I remember because I talked with Lewis before about accents, and one of the things he said for him specifically was that because I told him before that you put on an American accent very, very well because he's been here in this country he doesn't live here anymore. I know he lives overseas, but he puts on a pretty good American accent, a very good American accent, I would say. But when I asked him about when you put on your Australian accent, is it harder for you to do? He's like, yeah, it's the toughest one for me to do. And I'm from there, but that's the hardest one for me to do because I'm spending over 30 years trying to get rid of it. Now me putting back on, I have to rewire my brain. It's a mess. But once I do it, I can get, it's not hard at that point, but it's difficult to get to that.
Get there. Yes.
Right.
So to echo that exactly the same for me. So I did a couple of movies with Lewis last year. I also did a couple with Casper Van Dien,
right?
And he's from Jersey,
right?
So it's actually really funny. So I spent years and years and years working to lose the accent because it is really strong. And like, I'm just looking. That's what I'm saying. If I start talking about Jersey or to other people who are from there,
that's why I want to, because I want to hear it come out. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. I really do want to hear it.
So
and
there's certain words like talk, cool, coffee. Like
right.
There's certain things like that are still consistent. But like as far as like the inflection, and so if I talk to somebody from there, then it comes out a lot. So like Casper started saying, "Hey, I'm from Jersey," and like we were on Battle for Saipan on the set, and so it's very serious, like war epic, and we're like, "Hey, yo, what's up?" So it got Guido really, really quick. But Lewis is like exactly the same way. Whereas, yeah, if I tried it, like if I were to get sides for an audition for somebody from Jersey, I would struggle with it, as crazy as that is. But if I have like a 5-minute phone call with somebody from there, then I mean, I'll spend the next week trying to lose it again. So it sounds stupid, but like I'm so glad that Lewis validated that because that's absolutely a thing too.
Right.
Shout out to Lewis, by the way, phenomenal actor.
Yeah.
And we can talk about Breakout. Hey, Breakout.
No, I know we're gonna get to that too. But I was just curious because I know we're kind of all over the place, but it's just that. But I was just curious about that because I wanted to actually just finish up on this real quick for the actors because when speaking of Battle Saipan, you play a Southerner in that movie.
Yes.
So this is the part that I was curious about with you because you worked hard on having to lose the accent and then trying to put it back on in this case on your own terms. It's very difficult. But then something as simple as a phone call with a friend over, in Jersey, it comes right back on. Now you're having a hard time getting rid of it again.
Yes.
So in doing that, in this case, say for your character in Saipan, having to put on a Southern accent, was that as difficult to do that, to try to rewire your brain to get the accent down right,
Yes.
or was it just as easy to be able to pull it off?
No.
No. Okay.
I'm actually bad at accents. Brandon will probably tell you that. It is one of my weaker elements.
Okay.
And so but when I read the character at first, the script, I read it Southern. Like I couldn't shake that was how she should be portrayed. And so I was like, shit, do I really have to learn this? And so I started listening to some things from the region, and then I
Right.
started memorizing the lines in that dialect. So that way there wasn't like learning the lines and then trying to do an accent on top, that I learned it speaking it that way. But
Okay.
then, fucking Casper, I don't know if I can swear on this,
You can swear, yeah.
comes in and starts broing out with me about Jersey. And so I have the
What part of
American
Jersey is he from
crew.
again?
He's from the northern part. So we don't even like
Oh,
associate really, because I'm from South Jersey. They're
right,
like
right,
different
right.
continents. But the accent's there.
Right.
So we're talking about that. And so I have this like really emotional scene in
Yeah.
an accent that I don't do. And then I have the American crew on the set, and then I have the Thai crew on the set. So you have two different languages happening, screaming over each other constantly. And then I have this accent I'm trying to do, and then Casper like talking about coffee. And it was like the exhaustion you see when if you watch the scene and get watching
Yeah, I
it,
know what you're
just
talking
like
about.
so
Yeah.
overstimulated. That's actually why, because I was like so much going on all at once. I was trying to keep it together, and I was like, terrible. But we had fun. It was a fun movie.
So to finish up with this here, then, so when you look back at that movie, Saipan, are you happy with what you were able to pull off as far as the accent concerned, considering the circumstance you were dealt with here? Because I don't. That's one of the reasons why I was really wanted to highlight this here, because Lewis, various other actors pointed out as well too, that some actors can do it easily with no problem. They can put on an
Yes.
accent, and others, like Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, they although they live in California, but they haven't. I don't think they've lived in
Boston.
Boston for so long time, but
Yeah.
they can. It seems like for them, they can put it on easily without any problems whatsoever. But there are some people that I've come across, even some that are not even actors that that because I live here in North Carolina, but people that are coming down from the northern parts of the country here, they're making their way down and they've been living here for years. Some don't lose the accent at all, whereas some do. And I don't understand how that works out, where some can keep it, retain it, and still very, very strong, and others just have a really hard time keeping it. And then when they have to put it back on, it's almost near impossible for some of them. So, but again, when listening to you talk now, and we're talking about Saipan, I'm listening to you. I remember, I know exactly the scene you're talking about. I know exactly which one you're referring to. But when you look back at it now, are you do you feel more comfortable now, having gone through that okay, if I have to go through another part that requires an accent outside of my comfort zone, I'm comfortable knowing that I can try to pull it off to the best of my ability to do the accent right, if you will.
It's sorry, there was how many parts of that question? Wait, so okay.
I know it's a
So
layered question.
um okay, so regarding my performance in it, I try not to watch myself in movies. I think a lot of other actors say the same thing about that. It's weird. It's hard for me to think and just like turn my brain off and just watch the story if I'm in it. Because I'm thinking about like, I should have tried this there, or work on finding your light, work on, I see all the technical elements of the process,
Right.
and the choices I made and why, the angles I made. So it's hard for me to just focus and say, hey, that was a good performance or not. More
Hmm.
so, I was trying to just hold my own. In really, I mean, I like historical pieces. Those are my favorite things personally. So I really, I wanted to be part of this, but it's really not my jam. I think it's pretty safe to say that, like, a war action movie is not really in line with my branding. So I wanted, because it was Brandon's first big one too, I really
Right.
wanted to make sure that I could hold my own in the cast and not look like, a Nepo baby. So it was more about did I do a satisfactory job as far as contributing to the overall film. And Brandon was
Okay.
very happy with what I did, so that was good enough for me.
Okay.
Um, I'm gonna try and not embarrass myself in the future and take on any more Southern accents. But but as far as other things, I mean, I've played different roles over the years. My favorite, which unfortunately the film never came out, but I played an ancient Egyptian goddess. So I actually learned some of my lines in ancient Egyptian, and that was really fun. So I like anything where I can really immerse myself in a character and in a world. And I think sometimes an accent or other languages can really help to achieve that. But I'm not seeking it out because it's not my strong point. Like my strong point is like, you know, selling a gag for a death scene or crying on cue. Like that's what I can really do well. I'm going to leave the accents to Lewis Mandler.
Well, so here's where I think it's a good way to segue, since you mentioned before about not feeling comfortable watching yourself on film. So getting into Breakout, then, um, so when you talked before about how you don't necessarily like to watch yourself on screen, for the reasons you pointed out here, looking back at Breakout now, when you're looking at back and now in hindsight, because if I recall correctly, and I remember seeing in the credits too, and I don't know why I keep forgetting these little details. I can remember other details, but some other ones it always goes over my head. But you did come up with a story, and we talked about it before. But when you look at the film now, the way things have turned out, the response people are giving of the film, I'm curious about your perspective on coming off of that project, and then we'll get into Black Mass in a little bit, but coming off of that project and then getting into Black Mass, if you feel a sense of confidence for yourself about what we've been able to pull off here, it turned out well. We're happy with it, and the response for we look like we're getting here has been rather positive. So I'm curious to hear about your perspective on how you're looking at the project yourself and the anticipation for the next set of work that you have coming down the pipe on here.
I'm very proud of Breakout. I learned early on in my producing career, which I was more quiet about at first, that no matter how good or bad a movie is, there's always an audience for it. And there's always someone who's going to love it and someone's going to hate it no matter what. So sometimes when I would get, you know, good reviews early in my career, I'd be like on cloud nine. And then someone would be like, this is the worst movie that ever existed ever. And, you know, and you're like, why don't they like me? So, you know, I learned really early on that you cannot take it personally and you cannot try to appease everyone. You have to make the stories, the movies, the characters, you have to do your best work and make what you think is best. Like you have to, you know, you have to be happy with what you did. And someone else will like it and someone else will hate it. And that's going to be every single time. So on this one, I really, really was passionate about it because I really like, so obviously the horror side of things, I like all aspects of it, but I really predominantly are in front of the camera for horror. But as far as action, it's not, this is going to be a whole separate high conversation, but there's not tons of great roles for women in action movies. There's starting to be some like, you know, female fronted stuff here and there now because it's trendy. But as far as like meaty, really fascinating female characters, they're generally there to be the love interest of the guy or the mom of, you know, the guy's kid who they both die at the beginning. He's going to get revenge on it. You know what I mean? Like they're like a casual sidestep or a motivator for an action movie to happen usually. So I learned early on, I'm like, I'm not going to really embrace that as an actor. However, as a storyteller, I really love it. I'm kind of a dude and like I like all those elements. I like fast cars, like big explosions, like fight sequences, I like hot girls. Like I like all of those elements and they all fit really organically into an action medium. And so I really wanted to succeed in telling those kinds of stories. And I didn't know if I would be eligible to. Because it very much, there's a lot of movement in our whole business right now, except really in the horror or in the action genre. It really still is very much a boys' club. They're kind of 10 years behind there, in front of and behind it. So it was very unique that I was going to get an opportunity to tell a story like this. And so I was passionate when it was getting greenlit, and I had some different perspectives on how it should go. I wasn't sure how that would be received. Like, for instance, Brian Krause is a friend of mine. We used to see each other a lot at red carpet events, and we had formed a little bit of a friendship over the years. And so I knew I always wanted to use him somewhere. And I had seen him in a tiny horror film years ago called Cyrus. He's going to hate me for this. Sorry, Ryan. And he hates the movie. He doesn't love the movie and how he was portrayed in it. And it's just not his favorite character play. But the point of it is that I saw it years and years ago at a horror festival. And I see tons of movies every year. But I always kind of, again, put in the back of my mind things that popped to me. And I liked the movie as a horror fan. It was catered towards horror fans. I thought it was very effective. However, I could see why he may not, super love it. But something that stuck with me was this beautiful man from Charmed, the most girly TV show out there, was playing this serial killer and playing it convincingly. And there was, some funky and cheesy moments, but there was an underlying layer to his performance, which was so impactful, and it stayed with me. And so when we had the opportunity to do this story, when it got greenlit, I immediately was like, I know it's not, it's not the same 5 top action guys that are in all of these movies. I said, but they humored a girl in the room, was like, maybe they'll humor some different casting choices. We already knew we wanted Lewis. We have a great ongoing relationship with him. Him and Brandon are, peas in a pod. They work beautifully together. And he's one of my favorites because he's super strong, dramatic actor, as well as somebody who can convincingly fight. And so we already knew that was a thing. And Christos, again, I think Brandon talked about this, looks just like his long lost kid. And I had known him from his show, The Bay. Right. And so I loved the idea of having this soap star in an action role. I just thought it was really badass. And he was coming off of doing something, a different Jim Columbresic movie. And so he was trying to establish himself more. And he was a smaller part in that action movie, but he was trying to establish himself more in, like, excuse the pun, but a meteor type of piece. And so I knew that he could act it, and I think that he could throw down as well. So it was just casting this villain character, and I was like, my friend from Charms can do it. And so, my producers were like, okay, Dev, good job. But we submitted a long list of names, and we didn't say whose submissions were whose, people that could play this character. And surprisingly enough, the distributor, who, again, can't champion Uncorked enough, came back and they asked for Brian. And all of my teammates, I think even Brandon, was like kind of surprised by that choice, because all the rest of them were, the stereotypical action names that generally you see in these titles. And so Brian was kind of the wild card, but they liked that. They saw the appeal in him, putting him in a unique role. And that's one of those great things when you work with like these mid-level distributors. They're able to take risks that some of these bigger studios may not be able to do. And so they absolutely did that on this project. And so it's very satisfying that it's paying off so far for them, because that encourages them and everyone else watching, like all the different players in our business watching, saying, hey, they took this risk and it worked for them. We should do more unique casting. We should do more unique stories. We should we should take some risks. And so I love it. And Brian, bless him, really dove into this. I mean, he knew me as, a scream queen. He didn't even know that I made movies, because I really hadn't talked about it publicly at that time. And so, I was just like, hey, Brian, will you come to my movie? And he was like, okay, Dad. Oh God,
I love his enthusiasm.
But it was very much like me, like begging, please, 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 and him being like, oh, okay. But when he accepted, he took it very, very seriously. And he really talked to both of us about what the character should be and the art for it. And he is so incredible. Like watching him work and then watching him and Tom and Lewis work opposite each other too. It was just, as an actor, as a producer, as a person, as a viewer, it was fascinating to watch them all work together and to watch them elevate each other within the scenes. It was an incredible filmmaking experience. It really was. I'm glad that it's being received well. It was a risk. You never know how it's going to go. I was pretty confident that that something character driven like this would appeal to audiences, because I think, for one, the great action movies of like the 80s, they all had a really meaty storyline, and they had an everyman that was tackling some really badass shit, and it didn't matter who you were. They didn't cater to one demographic. They didn't cater to, the 18 to 65 males. They catered to general audiences, and that showed. And I was like, okay, why do these mid-level action movies that are being produced right now, why do they have to be so formulaic? Why do they have to cater just to that one demographic because it sells? I was like, why can't we keep those elements, but then add in a meatier story and really good performances and see if we can rope in everyone? You're not catering to women, you're not catering to kids or teens, you're not catering to people who don't like action movies. I was like, there's a whole other audience out there. Let's try to get them too. And that was the goal in making this movie. And, it's not out yet, so we'll see how it does. But so far in the initial reviews, I think people are understanding what we were trying to do and supporting us on it, which is like, all you can ever ask for when you make a movie.
When it starts to approach with the release date, do you get a little nervous about, what the outcome is going to be? Because you pointed out before, and everyone, I'm sure a lot of people may know this here, that it's a very fickle thing, the industry. And yes, you anticipate one thing, doesn't work out, and then the one thing you didn't anticipate to work out works out even better than you anticipated. So yes, the expectations on your end, how are you feeling about it now, and how you're dealing with it moving forward here, leading up to the release?
I'm nervous. I don't usually get nervous about them. I'm always optimistic because, we get paid if it does well, and if it doesn't, we don't. Right. And and then that could also jeopardize future work. So you always hope that it's going to do well for a variety of reasons. Right. Plus, you want to reach the audience. That's why we're all in this to begin with. So you hope that it resonates. You hope that it's financially successful. But I know my genre pretty well. So at this point, I'm pretty confident in when we go to make a movie that we're able to reach the audience that we intend. So I'm very comfortable there. With this, I was and I am nervous because it's a newer venture. I made Escape from Ensenada, which is female fronted action movie. Right. And that did extremely well overseas. I'm famous in India, apparently. So I know that I know that I can do it. I just don't know if it's going to reach the audience that are intended for. Right. And Brandon, is really in a great spot in his career right now within the action industry. He's a name that's exciting financiers, his name that's exciting distributors, the action scene, the people within it, they're all starting to know and appreciate his work. And right. So I'm nervous for that and wanting to make sure that it delivers and the quality that, he's starting to be associated with. And I think it's probably not, a huge guess to see that this is a little bit of a smaller budget than some of the other titles that he's worked on recently. So we're always also concerned about his trajectory. Does it look like he's continuing to move forward and continuing to move up as he should? And so there was a lot of pressure in making this project and making sure that with what we had to work with, it lived up to the people that were involved in it and trusting us, and that it reaches the people and the fan base that it needs to. And is anyone going to like it when it does? So I guess we'll see, but I hope it does. I'm very proud of what we were able to do.
I enjoyed the film too, and I remember when Brandon had, and I told it before yesterday, as of this recording, that I was genuinely surprised that he was like, "Here's the movie, check it out." And I was like, it was like a nice little surprise at the end of the day to get from him. But You talked before about the process of what it took to make the film, but I was curious if at any point, because I know you championed Brandon to take on the directing duties here, but when you were making the film in the middle of the production or beginning towards the end after the fact, whatever the case may be, when you looked at everything being put together, did you ever come to realize, what, maybe I could have directed it myself too? I mean, I think I could have done, something with it. If it turned out that Brandon didn't want to take on the role for directing, that maybe I could have thrown myself in the mix and say, by the way, let me try, and I can show you what I can do here. So I'm curious about if there was any sort of
No.
no, okay,
No, I don't. And the reason why, again, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about Black Mass, but
right,
I really don't have directing aspirations. I love
okay,
producing. I feel very confident in that role. Um, I think overall, I don't know what to do as a director. I I just don't. It doesn't compute to me. I am definitely a producer, and
got it.
so for that, I would never have thrown my name in the mix. I do know a few other people who work in the action industry that I could possibly throw a name out. But I also, even though I am pursuing producing where I wasn't before now, I still am hesitant to take on uh, jobs for other directors and other people because we have our own way of doing things.
Right.
And it becomes very much a real job when I'm hired on by other people. So I really like
Mm,
I produce because I like to story tell, and so producing for other people, I probably will end up doing it, but I'm not seeking it out right now um, because it becomes very much a 9 to 5 job then. And I like creative control. I like being able to tell a story. And Brandon and I work very seamlessly in achieving a goal for a creative vision. So I know how he works and how he tells stories. I know his strengths and his weaknesses. And so I cater to those. And with Breakout, for instance, like I had a lot of insight and a lot of, for lack of a better word, direction for the actors and the character
mhm,
motivations because
right.
I was telling their story. And Brandon was shaping it and putting the whole package together and directing how all of that worked. But I think if you talk to Christos or Brian and even Lewis a little bit, like I had a lot of the character motivations, the moments in the arc. I really protected that while I was on set and in post. So
Mm.
we really, again, he Brandon brings out the best in me as a storyteller, and I try to bring out the elements that make him, the badass that he is.
So this leads me to the next subject here for Black Mass, because it's really interesting. You pointed out that you didn't have any aspirations, excuse me, to direct, but here you are making your directorial debut.
Director, I know.
So, but I'm curious about that for you, because I'm wondering if anything has changed for you as a result of come, because right now you're in post right now for Black Mass at this point here, and there's you've talked before about getting the film out in cans, and there's a whole preparation for
Yes.
that as well too. But with that being said, though, once you've already completed that, that part of the job as far as directing is concerned and going through the experience, has anything changed at all about, maybe I'm warming up to the idea of going into the next directing project here if the opportunity were present itself?
Um, oh man, I'm already getting this question a lot. I mean it when I say I did not have directing aspirations.
Right,
Ironically, I became a director because I was a producer.
right.
The producer in me did not want to leave this deal on the table. And I
I
couldn't
see.
find anyone else I really wanted to direct it. So it was like, shit. It ended up because I'm a control freak, frankly, that I couldn't sign it over to somebody else because I'm very protective of the story. And
Okay.
if I trust Brandon to execute what I wanted to do with this story because he knows how I work, he knows how I storytell. But I didn't know within the means that I had that somebody else would get that, and so it really became don't make the movie or do it your damn self. And so I did, and I'll let other people talk about it. But from what I've seen and what I've heard so far, my team was very in my corner about my ability to direct this. But it's really, I don't even know, to be honest with you, and it's probably horrible to start my press tour with this, but I don't even know that it's because I was a good director per se. It's more that I was just meticulous about the details of this story and how I wanted the final product to look. And so kind of like how I got into producing, I reverse engineered directing into into having that final result. And I mean, I'm still in the middle of it because we're going through post now. That's been a weird experience because I've always sat in on post. I'm a firm believer as a producer that even as an actor, that your story is told in post. So you tell it 3 times, right? You write the screenplay, that's one version story. You film it, that's another, and then post crafts it together. That's the final version. But the way that we make films, post is always that winning element. It's always where it all comes together, or doesn't. And so I've always been very, very active in post. On Breakout, they did a whole edit with a third party, and I was displeased. And so
you said it very lightly too.
we took it back, and I sat in on the edits, every moment of it, and I sat in on all the sound editing, and I made all of those notes. And so I really meticulously crafted the final thing that we ended up with. And Brandon kind of saw how the reworking was working, and then went into like superhero mode there and really, I think, elevated the product that we had. So for Black Mass, it's a weird experience because I've always, sat over Brandon's shoulder in post, or whoever we're working with in the post house, and just kind of blurted out producer notes. But this time, he's editing and asking what I want willingly instead of me just forcing my opinion on there. And and so it's yeah. Well, because I mean, I don't know if you've ever worked with producers, but it's always the director being like, producer notes, you know what I mean? It's not usually a welcome thing, and it's not usually a willing participant. And half the time they're right, if I do say so myself. And so this is weird because like there's no producer here. It's just him and I mostly doing the post on this to bang it out so quickly. And he's, willingly asking me and I'm having to make all these decisions. And I have, a very strong opinion on some elements that I definitely want there. And the rest of it, I'm used to Brandon making the decision on. So I'm like, oh, snap, that's me. What do I want? And I'm having to constantly all day ask myself in this new medium, what do I want, how I want it to look. And so it's been a very big learning experience, been really interesting. And I started working behind the camera because I wanted to be a better actor. I wanted to know, when I stepped on camera, what lens is that? So I know where my frame is. What's the lighting guy doing over there? Where do I need to deliver my line so that I find my good lighting? The sound guy's doing this. If I do this in my performance, it's going to fuck the sound. So like I started learning everyone's job. I did everyone's job at least once. So that way I could appreciate how the bigger picture of achieving the movie took place. So this is definitely the final nail in that coffin of learning how all the different pieces and all the different positions work together to achieve that final goal. It's weird being the final decision maker. Right. The control freak in me likes it, not gonna lie, but I think that if I have a choice going forward, I would prefer to tell stories as the person in front of the camera or the person producing it, and occasionally writing a story, of course. But would I never direct again? No, I have 1 or 2 other stories that I really like that if I can't convince somebody to direct, I might attempt to take it on. But I'm not seeking out those opportunities. I'm getting a lot of questions already, like, hey, you're directing this, what's your next one? Right. If the right opportunity presented itself and I had a really good, if I was very confident in what I would want to do with the direction, I would direct again. if I was just given an opportunity and I did not feel confident about something that I could bring to the table as a director, I would not accept it, because kind of to go back to what our conversation was before, I don't want opportunities handed to me when I personally know, 30, 40 directors that are killing themselves for an opportunity and who are much better at this job than I would be. Right. I would much rather work in the areas that I feel I'm the strongest at, or stronger than other people, frankly. And I would want those people who are the best at their positions to be on my team as well.
So is it fair to say that the experience in directing your feature here, was it kind of an arduous process for you to kind of put it all together in under those circumstances in that capacity, where you don't necessarily feel too comfortable and wanted to take on the next project that you could potentially direct as well too, assuming that everything goes well, it's very well received, that if people respond very well to this, that they may say, you know what, you are really good at this directing, you should direct another film. Here's a film that we think you would be best for, or better yet, what other movie do you have right now that you think would be a good idea to start off to put together here? Because if I know you just answered the question, but I'm just curious about because there's a lot of hesitation that I'm getting from you about this whole process, and I hope it's a fair thing to point out, but the hesitation that I'm picking up from you, it seems like as if though, because I don't want to give the wrong impression, but I'll be straightforward and ask. It didn't seem like it was a pleasant one for you, if that makes any sense. Is that kind of a fair assessment to make?
It's a very fair one.
Okay.
So it's yes, but probably not for the obvious reasons.
Okay.
I'm very passionate about story, very protective of the story. And I'm also a little spoiled, frankly, with the budgets that we've been able to work with.
Okay.
A few things with the exception.
I didn't think it was an answer. That's a good one. I like that.
It was a bit of a challenge to go back to our very, very, very indie roots. Right. I'm always up for a challenge, so I really wanted to do it. But my storytelling ideas were this big, and my budget was like this big, and so I'm trying to make a masterpiece on a crafty budget. And so it was very, 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 very stressful, frankly. But I called in literally 15 years worth of favors to make this movie happen. So probably most people will not know anything close to what the real budget is, because on camera, it's I'm biased, but it's pretty damn cool. Like, the movie is pretty, like, we're not done yet, but from the rough assembly we've done so far, it's pretty cool. So I don't think it will be reflected in how limited we were in our resources to achieve this. But I definitely lost a few years of my life and definitely gained a few more gray hairs while trying to do it. So I have a greater appreciation for the position. It is an invaluable learning experience. I do suggest that anybody who likes the filmmaking process do it at least once. I am grateful and confident in what we did achieve with this. So I'm very satisfied with my product, and it is very personal. So I'm trying to approach it as we get closer to showing other people what I've done with it. I'm trying to build that thick skin back up, because where I've really mastered it with other projects, this is it's the first time I'm doing it in this capacity. And so it's a very vulnerable feeling. And it's not, it's not a slot filler. Like, I know you're in the same boat with me. There's a lot of like curated stuff out there. There's a lot of, here's this September release kind of stuff. And so those are very easy to like do your best work and then not get attached and just hope it goes well. But this is my passion project. And so, I want people to love it. I hope that they do.
In hearing everything you just said, this question kind of popped up in the middle of our conversation that I really wanted to ask you and get your perspective on, because lately I've been kind of in a position where I'm hearing people's stories in various capacities of their careers they've chosen to go through. And the one I always um, lean back to is the entertainment industry. It's not an industry that I am involved in the capacity you were in, and the various people that I talk to as well too. But it's one that I know for a fact, just being more or less a spectator, and now I wouldn't say a commentator, but someone that,
Commentary, yeah.
well, I guess is the best way. I'm still trying to figure out that the proper way of going about it. But the point I'm getting at is that this it's interesting for me to see. Like I'm a big, I root for the underdogs. I love finding the hidden gems, and I'm so surprised the amount of work that I've come across from the various people that I've been introduced to through their said work, and then being in this position right now where I've been able to talk to various people in the industry that I never thought I would have ever talked to. Like one of the first people, and if it wasn't for my friend Steve doing this here, I don't think I would have had the balls to make this move. But when we had the opportunity to speak with Jesse V Johnson, um,
Hey, yeah.
it
Snaps
was
for
one of
Jesse.
yeah, so it was one of those things where I just could not believe because I became a fan of him after watching, becoming a fan of Scott Adkins and then
Yeah.
checking out his work since all those years that I've first been introduced to him and the very stuff that he's done prior to Undisputed 2 and among other things as well. And then being introduced to Jesse's work as a result of Scott. And then from there, it kind of was a trickle effect of like all these other things I've been introduced as well to. I checking out Jesse's and Scott's film Debt Collector. That's where I became a
I
fan of.
love that
I
movie.
love that
Gosh,
movie
what a
too.
masterpiece that is.
I think
Jeez.
so. I think so too. But that film made me a fan of Louis Mandler, and because of that film, I looked into Louis's work, which then led into various other people that I became introduced to as well too.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I've been able to have some form of communication with him. Gary, someone that I think you know as well too. I
Yeah.
became really well
Wonderful.
acquainted with. Great guy too. In fact, we happened to message earlier today too. I told him I was gonna be chatting with you.
I
Um,
love him. Gosh, he's
he's
such a phenomenal. Not only is he a phenomenal actor, he is like one of the nicest human beings on the
Yes, I agree
planet. And I,
100%.
yeah, it's
And
wonderful. Hi, Gary.
shout out to Gary too here. But
Yeah.
what I'm trying to point out here is that it's it's interesting for me when I started going into why I started doing this it's really because I just wanted to learn more about why I'm interested in the finer details in films, like just the little nuances that I come across. In fact, I'm surprised I forgot to bring this up earlier because there's actually a movie that I saw that you had done that your husband directed too, the Black Dahlia Hauntings, I
Like
think it
Dolly
was.
Hunting. Yeah.
Yes, there's one scene that I remember I distinctly thought you were so good in. It was a scene where I think it was by the beach, if I remember, because I've only seen the movie once, but forgive me if I don't remember the exact details. But you had the lipstick on, and you had like that little Joker smile that you had going on,
Mhm.
and it was a self dialogue, and the way that they was
Yes.
put together, and the way that you were forming those differences in personalities that you're portraying there. I love that scene. I thought that you were
Thank
so
you.
good in that scene. No, I really mean that too. I think you were so good in that scene, and I love the way that it was composited together. I'm
Yeah.
not sure how much of an influence you had that, or if it was all brand. I have no idea, but the way that that was put together, those are the finer details that I remember that I tend to look out for because when I saw that film, I was still trying to get myself accustomed to it. But once I got to that part of the movie, it all started coming together for me. It's like now I understand the overall picture. But the problem that I have with a lot of people in nowadays, especially because people's attention spans are a lot shorter, is that they tend to overlook those finer details and not notice the bigger picture when I tend to find those little moments. And that moment for me in that film really, not to say that I didn't notice before that you were a good actor. I do believe that I do have come across films you've done that I have felt like you were a good actor, but for some reason that scene stuck out the most for me. That made me realize, okay, you are a really really good actor because
Mhm.
I don't think people really understand. I'm not an actor, so I don't think it's fair for me to say this, but I'm just going to say it anyways. That's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And having to do that, I don't know how long it took you guys to shoot that, but to do one personality, then do the next one, then do the next one, then the next one, and then having to keep that consistency and put it all together for it to come out as well as it did, that's something that's very difficult to do. I think for a lot of people don't need to understand that. And if someone tends to overlook that and say, "Oh, the movie sucked," but what about that one little scene? Oh, I forgot about it. I'm like, that's the reason I think you need to pay attention to the movie again. So I'm going long-winded here, but the point I'm trying to ask you here is because having gone through your more or less your career, kind of in a nutshell, I I've been in a position to get people's perspective on their point of view as far as like they believe things happen for a reason. You very much pointed out that you believe it does, but I'm also curious about your perspective on legacy because when you are putting your projects together and the various things you've done and you have the resume speak for itself and then you have network with people that believe in what you do and are giving you the opportunities because you are good for the said part that you're trying to go for. I'm wondering if in the long term for you, if you were to look back at your career now, at least at this point, if your legacy is an important factor, or is it something that you're just taking it day by day for yourself and you don't care, what people will say about you, but if you care more about if you're more happy with yourself and knowing that what you've been able to accomplish um, made you a better person, made you a stronger person, and the projects you've worked on were just a supplement to help you through that personal journey you've gone through for yourself. Because if you look at it from more of a standpoint of like, this is my legacy, but what does that mean for you? So I'm really interested about how you look at yourself now as a result of everything you've gone through and what's expected coming out of your future projects here. Not knowing what the outcome is going to be, but being optimistic about the various things you're going to go through as a result of these new endeavors you're taking on here. So I hope it's not a elongated question, but I hope you understand why I wanted more to close off with you having to finish with that
No,
here.
I love that. I think that's man, this is such a good interview. Okay, so legacy is important, right? I think we all at some point in our lives think about what we're doing and why. And with cinema, we absolutely Brandon and I had this conversation probably earlier than we wanted to during COVID about like, what are we doing and what impact are we making? Are we happy with it? What's our goal? What's our legacy?
Right.
And it's funny you mentioned Black Dahlia. So Black Dahlia was the first real movie that we made together. We made just a quick little thing called Area 51 Confidential.
Yeah, I know that
It
movie.
was during the paranormal activity phase,
Yeah.
and we're like, let's make a sci-fi version. So we were the first sci-fi found footage film, and we made that for $400 in Vegas. And 2 months later, it was edited and picked up. We're like, oh, this shit's easy. Stupid.
Yeah.
So we made I can't. So we made the Black Dahlia Haunting because that was the first time we reached out to distributors, and we heard
That
that
was
paranormal was
Gravitas
selling.
Ventures too, is that right?
Gravitas, yes.
Yeah.
And they were now they're huge, but they were a
Yeah.
brand new little indie outlet for this new thing called VOD at the time. I can't. So we're like, all right, sure, let's make this little movie, right? And I like true crime, and they wanted a paranormal movie, and I was like, okay. So my publicist at the time repped another personality, I guess, if you will, who was on the show Ghost Hunters at Sci-Fi.
Hmm.
And so we tasked him to advise us on how to make it and how paranormal stuff would interact. He ended up being involved in the movie. Um, but we shot that whole thing for about $1,500. And that cave scene that you were talking about
Yeah.
was literally just Brandon and myself and a camera. We had no crew. And we were in Vegas at my mom's house, and he was like, I think there needs to be one more little piece here to really showcase the possession and the duality of this character. I'm gonna write something up real quick and let's go shoot it. And I was like, okay. I mean, it was like a holiday. We literally hiked up to a cave at my mom's house and just shot it real quick. The performance in there was edited entirely by Brandon. That was totally his vision for that.
Okay.
But the performance, the back and forth, I did in camera simultaneously. There was no cuts for that. So that was my first Best Actress win. Yay,
Yeah.
snaps. But cooler news of that in Legacy, to come back to your question, is that tiny little $1,500 movie went on to be the third best-selling Redbox title of the season under The Conjuring and Curse of Chucky. Because it was such a massive hit, Ghost Hunters did their season opener the next season on the Black Dahlia. Because of that coverage and sci-fi backing it, the media attention pressured police to reopen the cold case for Elizabeth Short. And they hit on additional evidence to help solve the case.
Interesting.
So, yes. So, because of our tiny little no money creative filmmaking adventure, we were set on a path to make films, and this infamous cold case got solved. That for me said, okay, that again, one of those big God moments that I told you all came together. That to me said that, you know, what we're doing here is fun, and what we're doing here is fun little adventures, but it has real world impact, and we can have real world impact and put good into the world along with our passion. And so that's why a lot of the movies that we have made have historical significance, have true crime elements, showcase real people or real social issues. There's always entertainment value in everything that we do, but we try to include something of serious substance for one reason or another in every movie we do. And even as simple as Breakout, which is like a fun popcorn action movie, you know, we really targeted the strained relationships between fathers and sons. We're hoping that if someone watches that, maybe it's a talking point for somebody. So every time, you know, you use your voice, you have an opportunity to make an impact. When we made the silly sci-fi and space movie with an alien, you know, we accidentally cast Vivica Fox in the role that ended up being the first time an African-American woman played the president of the United States ever.
Yeah.
I mean, we ended up on the primetime special during the election, during the live election coverage about this incredible monumental feat we did. And we just thought we were making a silly sci-fi movie. And, you know, and I like Vivica Fox, we had the same agent. She's badass. But, you know, so you never know where your voice and your passion and your faith can take you and the impact that you can make on it. And so knowing that now and some of the incredible opportunities we had from some of the limited reach that we've had, we absolutely factor that into everything that we've done and everything that we have coming up. We hope our legacy is that we've entertained people, that we've made people question some things, analyze some things, and overall just left the world slightly better than we found it in our weird little way. That's the legacy.
And so on that note, we'll go ahead and close off here, but I want to say thank you so much for giving your time. I was really looking forward to this conversation with you because having heard your story and the various conversations you've had in the past as well too, I've really found your story to be rather unique. There's just certain perspective that I am not privy to that I was hoping that you were able to indulge me with, that you were able to do so, and I appreciate that. So, you know, especially for Black Mass, I would really love to help you promote that movie too. So if there's any way or shape or form, absolutely, you're welcome. But if there's any way, shape or form that I can, there's anything I can do to help out, I would love to have you back on. We can talk more about the film, and I'm hoping that by that point, maybe your perception about directing will slightly change as well too, to make it a little bit more comfortable for future endeavors down the line as well too. But so for the cameras, I want to say thank you again, and until next time, I hope to have you back here, and we just pick up from where we last left off.
I wanted to just quickly thank you as well. This has absolutely been a top interview for me. Thank you for asking insightful, intelligent, and soul-searching questions. It's really been a unique experience for me as well with this, and very rewarding. So thank you for having me on.
Well, the pleasure is mine. But so for the cameras, cheers to you then.
Hi, thank you.
All right, so.